I am joined with the man himself, Andrii TELIZHENKO. He's a Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. Andrii, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Good morning, Jamarl. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm watching the news as every time. Always, these last couple of years, the developments are just going crazy, crazy. Are blowing the regular orthodox standards of politics and international
Yep.
relations, and anything that is happening we thought in the world was normal today is going outwards
That's
throughout the
rich.
door. So
Yes,
that's
out
what
the
I.
window. It's fascinating. I've never seen anything that has been taking place over the last, let's say, month ever in my lifetime. And the meeting between Zelensky and Trump and Vance Friday just adds to it. Like, I mean, on some level, I get it, right? Like, you had the previous administration that said we're with you for as long as it takes. You had Zelensky coming into congressional meetings, congressional applause, all of that stuff. Basically, they treated him as the belle of the ball. And he would go and he would say, I need $1 billion. They said, here's $1 billion. They say, here's 2 billion. He says, what do you mean? This is only $2 billion. I need 5 billion. And they give him 5 billion. I need F-16s. I need this gun. I need that gun. I need this missile. I need this missile. I need permission to fire missiles into Russia. And then Trump comes in. And as they point out, there's a new sheriff in town. No, no, no. And it's even reported in the Kiev Post, I believe. Well, I think it was the Washington Post, but Kiev Post also reported it, that Trump is now, after that meeting, talking about cutting all aid or considering cutting all aid to Ukraine. Basically, you're a tough guy, be a tough guy on your own. Give me your overview of that meeting, because I'm super curious about what was going on in Ukraine as that meeting was taking place, meaning what was Ukrainians thinking as they saw Zelensky flip out in the White House in the Oval Office.
The problem Ukrainians have divided now. From what I speaking to the people on the ground, I know that a lot of them now are supporting Zelensky. They're trying to put this agenda back that we are backing the president. Even doesn't make sense of Ukrainians supporting Zelensky. They're against Trump now because Trump was acting bad towards Ukraine or is trying to cut aid to Ukraine or talking bad to Zelensky. And at the same time, you have all these military police around the streets taking their men and sons off the streets into the front lines like dogs. And nobody's talking about that. Nobody's saying that Zelensky is bad. Now Trump is bad. So they're trying to change that narrative in Kiev and Ukraine. And half of the population or some are trying to back it up, but it's for a couple of weeks or days. It's not going to last long. Usually this euphoria is going to go away and people will realize they are in deep shit. So what Ukraine really is in. And there's half of the population that understands and says, oh my God, what is happening? This has never happened. And Ukraine is done now just because of this clown in power who doesn't know how to deal and doesn't understand international relations. So it's divided now, that's for sure. A lot of people are going against each other in Ukraine just because of this political game. And we're seeing all these pictures of soldiers throwing away American flags from their uniforms and on media and saying, oh, we're going against America. Well, they throw away all the helmets and all the ammunition and all the rifles that are American made, the artillery and Hummers and everything else. They should throw that out. That's American made. They should throw that out and say, oh, we're against America. We're going to fight with whatever we have. There's nothing left to have. There's nothing. Europe didn't give a lot. Whatever Europe gave, it's gone. So this is the reality. And they're going crazy there. The problem is too much pride. They lifted with the strategy with the USAID funds and NED funds and all those CIA groups that were laundering money to Ukraine. They did their job. They basically rose the pride of Ukrainians higher than anybody else, which is basically Nazism, saying that you are a priority nation and everybody owes to you. And that's what they did. And at the same time, they put them on the needle of dollars that Ukraine needs to be fed all the time because it's going to collapse. That's what Ukraine is today. It's a collapsing, failing nation without any foreign support. It's gonna die completely. It's already dead, but it's on life support. And unfortunately, this is what it is today. And for me, as Ukraine, watching what's happening in the Oval Office was just crazy because even dictators and enemies don't talk to each other like this. Trump
Right.
did the right thing. Trump actually pointed out to Zelensky, man, and Vice President Vance, you are, the problem is Zelensky is not just a leader who came to the Oval Office as a neutral leader and talking. He's a so-called illegitimate president by the constitution of Ukraine. At the same time, he is on totally life support from American dollars and funds and taxpayer money. So he has to not play a game as a neutral leader or independent guy. He has to actually obey. That's the biggest problem here. He doesn't understand. They're not at the same level. And Vance and Trump pointed that out to him, said, look, you have so much problems in Ukraine. You have no democracy. Your men are dying. You're trying to come to tell us what to do. And that flipped Zelensky out. That flips Zelensky out because nobody tells him the truth to his face. Nobody, like Yermak, the Europeans, they're keeping him in a warm bath. They kept him in the warm bath for the last 4 years, saying that you're the true leader of the democratic world, you're the new Churchill, whatnot, all that crap, whatever they're trying to feed to everybody. They fed to him, and he actually believed in it. The problem is Zelensky, he doesn't understand foreign politics. He has a so-called law degree, but he never actually went to university, so he bought that law degree. He doesn't have a higher education. Guy is totally not in his place, trying to work international, very actually hard international relations and very strategic stuff, which he doesn't even completely has no understanding of. That's why Ukraine is failing. That's why he had some brains in his head. This war would never start, and that's what Trump pointed out to him, and he was right to do that. And I'm glad that he did it. And actually, I was applauding.
Yeah, it was an intervention, to put it mildly. I mean, let me see which clip. I played one clip before, basically saying he was disrespectful. Right here's another one where Trump is talking about, because what's wild about it, the entire time Trump is like, dude, I'm trying to get a deal. I'm trying to get a ceasefire. You have no cards. And what Trump is trying to communicate to him is correct. You've lost the war. You are literally trying to pull kids, 18-year-olds, into the combat zone in order to fight. That's how bad things are. And just to make the point clear, Vance pointed out, you are dragging people and throwing them in the vans because you are in manpower shortages. And here's an example. I mean, I have a few of these. I've been watching these clips for months now. This is a mom trying to keep her kid from being dragged. And look at this. I mean, this has been taking place over all of Ukraine, by the way.
Every day, all over Ukraine.
On this one, the guy's walking his dog, and they snatch him from walking his dog. Can you imagine that? You go out to take your dog for a walk, and these goons grab you off the street, throw him into the van, and leave the dog. This is screaming. Like, this is, explain how this works. So how do they know who they're grabbing? Like, I'm walking my dog. Okay, how do they know who I am when I'm walking my dog to grab me and take me to the front lines?
They don't. What is happening?
Arbitrary people.
Yeah, look how it works. These guys are with the support of the police. This is the so-called military police, the Tzaka, they call them in Ukrainian, and they have no legal authority overall because there's no law for them. That's one thing. So these guys are illegal, but they are the Zelensky's army to keep everybody scared. Additional with the Secret Service of Ukraine that's having Nazi camps around and concentrated camps that are for people who want peace and killing journalists like Gonzalo Lira. And these are for the normal people who are not speaking out, but just out there. So there are men in Ukraine that are being living in their houses for 2 years in their apartments. Their moms come and bring them groceries because they cannot get out into the street because they're going to get taken to the front line.
Well,
these guys.
I want to nail this down. It's not like this is Bob Cobb and we have Bob Cobb on our list to get. This is okay.
No, this is random. Okay. This is a random. They see a guy saying, "Oh, he's the age between like 25 and 60, or even younger than that, and they go and get him. That's it. They don't care who it is. There's some men being taken off the streets who are with their children. The children are being left on the street alone, and they've been taken to the front to the military police headquarters. So this is what had happened. So what they're doing is they are, with the support of the police. The police is backing them up. These guys are running around randomly around people's houses, apartment buildings, or in vans driving around. Or sometimes when I heard stories, there's people on the bus stop. Man going to work in the morning because some people do need to go to work. They have no other choice. They cannot hide. They don't have the money or the funds or the family to support them. So some do go to work, and there's men on the bus stations, bus stops, and there's a regular bus stops by, and they think they're going to go to work, but no, they're out of that bus. The military police, where the police comes out and drags 20 men right into the bus, and they basically surround them. 20 people surround these 20 guys, and they just drag them in and go away. And these guys go sent to the front lines from 2 days up to 2 weeks. These guys do not get training. The training they have, they live in a field because there are no military headquarters or camps for them to live in. So basically, it's a field with tents, without no bathrooms, no showers. They're there from 2 days up to 2 weeks. They're not being fed properly. They don't even have cutlery kits or like nothing. They're just there cutting out plates from bottles and getting fed like whatever. Even in jail, they're being fed better. That's the footage I've been seeing from people who are there, and they've been sent to the front. They give them some uniform, a machine gun with the 30 bullets, and then they get sent to the front. That's it. That's what it is, and they die within a week because they don't have no training or nothing. And if they try to surrender to the Russian forces, they get shot in the back by the Azov battalion. So this is the reality in Ukraine. This is the so-called democracy. This is Zelensky sitting in the White House. He should not only be shouted at, they should have arrested him for crimes against humanity. That's what the White House and the state administration should have done. Not only for crimes against humanity, but also arrested him for the taxpayer money that he basically, the U.S. taxpayer money that he put into his pocket, and then investigate him. That's what they should have done.
That's going to be the extra interesting part, because now that they pissed Trump off, he's talking about investigations. People are screaming for investigations into where did the money go, because Zelensky pointed out, well, it's like $100 billion that we didn't get, and so Trump came out, hey, okay, if you didn't get $100 billion, we need to know where the money went. And that is going to be one of the most fascinating things. I want to play another clip for you, though, to get your take on. This is Trump talking about trying to make a deal. Zelensky being a petulant child.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on out here. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
You're
again, running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running
Mr.
low
President.
on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than it agrees. It's going to be a very hard thing to do.
That clip is fascinating because it's an intervention. Like he is. So in the reporting in the United States, in Time magazine, they pointed out that Zelensky was delusional. They call him messianic. They said he is out of touch with reality. And Trump is like, you are losing. Your people are dying. What is wrong with you? Why don't you want a ceasefire if you can get a ceasefire? Meaning, if we could stop the bullets from flying. By the way, Russia's not going to accept a ceasefire, but whatever. Trump is like, if you can stop it, you should stop it. With Trump's idea being, if we can stop the bullets, then we can maneuver from there with, at the very least, your people not dying. And he is like, nope.
This showed everybody's face.
Yeah.
Zelensky's face, the Europeans' face, who wants war and who wants peace. yeah, maybe the Russians would not go for the ceasefire, but at least they are willing to sit down and start talking.
Right.
The same thing with negotiations. You have to compromise on your pride and sit down and start talking. That's what Zelensky came to power with, and he lied. And that's what he doesn't. He thinks he's being backed by globalists and by the European Union that will continue his war. Because for Zelensky, the stoppage of the war means his political or maybe physical death. Because everybody will understand what happened and what he did to the country, and he's done. So that's why he needs this war to continue, not only for his masters that want to make money on this, but for himself. So Trump's saying, and he should look. You don't want to. He showed who Zelensky is. That he does not want peace because this is being happening behind closed doors all the time. Nobody saw this. Nobody understands who Zelensky, how he acts. I personally know. I've been talking to Prime Minister Fico's team, and I know that Zelensky was threatening to Prime Minister Fico for the last 2 years, or the last year and a half.
Threatening Fico?
Politically, not physically, but politically, that Ukraine is going to go against Slovakia, that Slovakia cannot do anything, that they're being backed by Washington, etc., etc. And this is how Zelensky talks to foreign leaders. Can you imagine how he's talking to Trump, the person and the president of the United States who's financing him, how he's talking to people who's not financing him or financing him, but in much lesser proportions. Zelensky doesn't even care about those people. That's for a great example. And Trump showed Zelensky's face.
What is his motivation? Like, is it because there are several ideas that I have, and I want you, because you've met Zelensky, you know him better than I do. Is it he's just committed cognitively to the war? Is it he feels he was led down a path? Meaning at the point where the US and Europe is like, we're going to back you for as long as it takes. We're going to give you all the money. We're going to give you all the weapons. We're going to give you all this stuff. And from his point of view, it's like, okay, you guys told me you're going to back me. And now you're pulling this nonsense or pulling out of the war. Is it that he thinks he's going to be killed or imprisoned at the end of the war? Like, what do you think is the primary motivation for him to act this way?
Look, you have to understand, Zelensky doesn't think like he's like a president of a country. He's not a statesman. He doesn't think about the country or the people or anybody else around the globe. He thinks about himself. I know who he is. He is a bully. Like by himself, how he acts. He's a drug addict, a bully, and that's what he is. He actually mentally a disabled person in a very bad way, not in the way of healthy, but in a broken way. That's what he is, and he was given the power to lead this war with the West. He was told that he's going to have the support of the West for this war in 2019. Right. He committed to this war to the Brits in 2019. That's his problem, and he understands that he's going to be killed or physically destroyed, politically destroyed, whatever, if this war ends. So that's why he needs to stay in power. That's why he doesn't want to have elections. Doesn't want to go away. He's standing his ground. He thinks that he's being backed by the globalists, by the Newlands and the Europeans. That they're going to continue to give him the money that he needs, but they cannot because Europe doesn't have the money. But he doesn't understand that. He's being fed lies. He doesn't think about when people think. Even I've been talking to different people around the globe, and I've been telling one thing to everybody: you have to understand. This guy doesn't think as the president of a country, doesn't think about his people. If he did, this would have been over. That's why everybody's like trying to tell him, this war is bad, you're losing. Right. And he first of all, he doesn't understand. Second of all, he doesn't want to understand because he thinks only about himself. He said, what's in it for me? I want to stay in power. I was told that I'm going to come out a hero. I'm going to live as a hero. I'm going to have all the money that I got. Nobody's going to try to investigate me because I'm a hero and I broke down Russia. No, he didn't break down Russia. He failed to keep Ukraine safe. It was his obligation not to have to start this war. It was his obligation as a country that doesn't have a nuclear capability to sit down on a table with a country that has nuclear capability. And first and second of all, the country that we were part of for more than 350 years. Yeah, 350 years. We were part of Russia, Russian Federation, the Soviet Union. We were one nation. We were much closer than the Belarusians are with the Russians and anybody else from the Soviet Union. We have families on both sides, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters living on both sides of the border. So this is what Ukraine is. They should have sit down and talk. Russia was open to sit down and talk. Said, give us just the promise Ukraine's not going to join NATO and we're not going to do anything. But no, everybody said Ukraine's going to join NATO. They put it in the constitution. Zelensky, the chief of the military armed forces in 2021, before the war, he said, I'm going to drive a tank throughout Moscow. What is this? Who are these people? They're warmongers. They wanted this war. They were provoking this war to make money for themselves and for their owners. Zelensky was promised a political career. Zelensky was promised a political career and billions of dollars. He's a billionaire. He maybe got more money than Trump has, but Trump got them legally, and his family is owning business legally. On the other hand, we have a dictator who's a billionaire. That's why he's acting this way, because he is a bully, and he's thinking about not that his country needs something. That's what people need to understand, what they need in Zelensky. He's not a statesman.
Arestovich pointed out that Zelensky was going to be prosecuted at the end of this war. Do you think that's true? That once this war ends, and again, I got to be honest, I don't know what Ukraine is going to look like at the end of this war. Mark Sloboda, because Trump went with this idea that I'm going to get a deal, I'm going to get a deal. It doesn't seem like Zelensky wants a deal, nor does it seem like Europe wants a deal. If the U.S. pulls its resources away, then Ukraine is going to collapse. And there's a question of how far does Russia go? Are they going to go to the Polish border? If so, then Ukraine is non-existent or it's something else. If, though, by chance, there's some kind of deal, will the next leader, the legitimate leader of Ukraine, prosecute Zelensky in the way that Zelensky has been going after his political opponents?
We have to understand Ukraine and what Ukraine is part of. It was historically part of the Slavic Russian world. There's the Anglo-Saxon world and there's the Slavic Russian world. Nobody's going to the Anglo-Saxon world trying to get Ottawa to join China or Russia or whatever. That's nonsense. The same thing here. The United States needs to pull out of Ukraine. If Trump also wants to move forward fast, and after what he saw, and hopefully understands what Zelensky is now, and show to the world, it's not just about if America is going to pull out, Ukraine is going to fail. No, if America is going to pull out, and we're going to have a neutral government in power in Ukraine that will lead throughout these negotiations with Russia and Washington, saying that putting a neutral government that will have no intelligence agencies of the United States in Ukraine or foreign intelligence agencies, have a new embassy, reformed U.S. embassy with the new Trump administration there and other embassies. That's it. That's the only legal grounds. Basically, have some sovereignty give some sovereignty for Ukraine, and the neutral government will make a peace deal on its own with Russia, or it will keep Ukraine fully intact as whatever is left of it, and lead it as a neutral country. That will be also a gain for everybody. Or Ukraine will choose to join Russia, probably won't, or it will choose to join physically with Russia, become some part of Russia, and that will be also to the neutral government to decide. But anyway, it will be peace. But the most important part, I think Ukraine will stay as a neutral country. Russia will want to have a country neutral by its border. They don't want to invade or take over fully Ukraine. They need a country that will be helpful for them, not only by their side on the borderline, but also be helpful for them in foreign organizations like UN, other OSCE, etc. So you'll have their voice and support, and you'll have a neutral government that will work together with Moscow. That's what I think it's going to lead to. That's what Trump needs to understand. They need to pull out of Ukraine. America is not gaining anything from this. This is just getting into total chaos. Zelensky doesn't have a voice. You pull out, you close down Starlink, it's over. You pull out your foreign CIA groups and other NSA and all the 60 intel agencies that the United States have out of Ukraine. And the New York Times showed that they were part of this war. They're the ones who were preparing the Ukrainian Nazi battalions, and they were fighting this war at the beginning when Russia went into Ukraine in the beginning. The CIA was part of this, and they still are. They're giving intel, maps, and satellite pictures to the Kiev regime today. Stop that. Agree on a neutral government, and you will have peace. I will tell you, and I will try to make everything from my end possible to make peace. I don't know where I'll be, but I will do whatever I can. And as soon as Ukraine at least gets some sovereignty for a couple of months, You will see this will be over. Zelensky will be over. He may be prosecuted, and I think he should be prosecuted for the crimes he did in Ukraine. He killed, 3 of my friends were shot by the Secret Service of Ukraine, and more than 1,000 people were imprisoned. More than thousands of people were in prison, and by the United Nations, it's over 15,000 political cases. Women are living in prisons, men are living in prisons for just believing in peace or wanting to be with Russia because Ukraine was part of Russia historically. It's not like Russia came into London and said, "Oh, it told everybody to be part of Russia." No, we were historically there. That's why we have so many times. That's why people did support Russia, wanted peace with Russia. It's not like Russia had propaganda there. There was Western propaganda of hatred toward Russia. That is the problem. Get that out. Trump needs to get that out. As what he did with the United States, get out of Ukraine, and you'll have peace, and he'll have full responsibility for that peace because he was the one who actually got the U.S. out of Ukraine, and that would be helpful for us.
To back you up on this, when Trump killed USAID, we uncovered all sorts of intelligence operations all around the globe that USAID was effectively working on in Romania and Georgia and Hungary, and also Ukraine, where 9 out of 10 media organizations were paid for by us.
90%, 90% of the media was owned by the American taxpayer money.
And it's like, what do you think those media organizations were saying? They obviously weren't pro-Russian. They were whipping up a fervor in a particular direction. I know this is painful for you, but why were your friends killed? What was the circumstances around their murders?
I can tell you that they were not political figures. They were not members of parliament. They were not, they were just regular people, political experts, going on television talking about peace for Ukraine. And one of them, I don't want to name his name publicly, but he got shot, but I can name it in any authorities that if they have questions. He got shot by the security service of Ukraine in front of his family. His child is disabled in a wheelchair, and he got shot right in front of his family when he opened the door to them. They shot him in his head. And that's it.
And they did that because they were giving political analysis, not wanting war, not necessarily.
Yes. He was just wanting peace. He said, we should not fight with Russia. We should not have war. It's going to destroy Ukraine. That's what I've been talking about. They were actually also after me. I was put on a kill list in Ukraine. I was sanctioned by the Ukrainian government. I was sanctioned by the U.S. first for going against the Biden administration and by Pompeo and his henchmen, and falsely. And then I got sanctioned in Ukraine. Then I was put on a kill list in Ukraine for speaking about peace. For the last 4 or 5 years, I said Ukraine should get away from foreign influence. Ukraine is going to be led to become a battlefield. I was saying this in 2018-19. Ukraine is going to become a battlefield if we continue this politics, and that's what Ukraine is. And I was followed. I had to flee Ukraine not because of the war. I had to flee Ukraine because my own government wanted to kill me for coming out and saying I want peace. I'm not connected to any agencies or Russians or Europeans or whatever. I was just by myself talking about this everywhere. So was my friends. And now they cannot because they were shot. Unfortunately, they were very unfortunate because I told everybody they had to flee. But because I was more fortunate, I don't know why, but I could get out. The problem is this is what Ukraine has become, a total dictatorship, like Gonzalo Lira. He was talking about the truth in Ukraine, and he got killed
in Ukraine.
He was an American citizen. Yeah. Can you imagine what they're doing to Ukrainians?
Yeah.
If he had an American passport, what happened to him? Can you imagine what's happened to Ukrainians?
And if
they're being
double down
tortured. I had friends who were tortured.
And Joe Biden didn't care. And Joe Biden didn't care.
Because they were backing this. Because they were the ones backing this. They were financing this. The USAID, they were financing all this nonsense in Ukraine. They were financing the Azov battalion. They were financing all these Nazis in Ukraine. That's why Zelensky needs to also take responsibility for this. And I hopefully Biden and his administration will be also put accountable for what they did, for what where the money went. Because a lot of money did not only settle down in Zelensky's pocket. More than 70% of that money that was lost was settled down in pockets of U.S. citizens. Basically, they stole from their own people. And one of the countries that was used for stealing this money was the United Arab Emirates. Let America investigate United Arab Emirates, follow the dollars through that country. That will be interesting to find out what happened next, because a lot of Zelensky's henchmen are getting financed and money laundered through the United Arab Emirates. And it's not in the news, this information. I'm just telling what I know from the inside. And a lot of Americans that were supporting this war, Vindman, all these crowds were being financed and laundered to those countries in the Middle East also. So I'm not saying those countries are bad or responsible. It's just that they used them. Maybe not. Maybe did not even know why they were being used, but they were being used in a way to launder the blood money from Ukraine.
What I was looking for was okay, right here. So it was a report. I remember when it came out. It said 70% of the weapons to Ukraine were missing, like they didn't know where they were. And the Biden administration admitted that they were not tracking the money and the weapons as they were going to Ukraine. It was like they were throwing money and weapons out of helicopters. Tucker Carlson recently pointed out that many of these weapons were being put on the black market, was being sold either in Syria, in Gaza, in Mexico, like the drug cartels, for, I think he said 20 cents on the dollar. So if the weapon costs $100, they only pay in $20 for it, 20 cents on the dollar. Oh, is that true? Is that something that you're aware of just based on your contacts inside Ukraine and the way money and weapons have been flowing into the country?
Everything is being sold out. Everything. If you can sell out a person's life, you're going to sell out bullets and weapons. And that's what they did. And they were not just selling them to Syria and to drug cartels. They were even selling them to the Russians, offering them on getting offers through the military intelligence of Ukraine and the Secret Service of Ukraine. That's how bad it was. And I can tell you that I know that from a fact that they were doing this. And people were responsible for all that nonsense being happening in Ukraine with the Democratic Party. I said Vindman was one of the persons who was allegedly giving Ukraine help through Poland, but he was responsible for overseeing the weapon transfers in Ukraine also. And I know that for a fact. And also those weapons were being, I said, overseen by the military intelligence of Ukraine together with the United States government for selling those weapons on the side. That's what they were making money on. Not just laundering money, but making money on selling those weapons. And I can tell you that those weapons that were being sold out and the weapons that were so-called coming into Ukraine, they don't even match because officially the warehouses were supposed to be full. The warehouses, this war was also to clean up the house. It was done especially for this because they were cleaning up the warehouses because a lot of the weapons under U.S. government and former administrations were being sold off on the side, and that's why they needed this war to give away so-called Ukrainian weapons by the list. One thing, officially they were giving them something else, and half of that something else was being sold out to the third market. So this is what the reality was. Everybody was making money while Ukrainians and Russians were spilling blood. How bad you can get. And you're still coming out and all these Europeans and Zelensky, and Zelensky knows everything about this. That's why I don't believe they're going to keep him alive in the West. And he understands this. That's why he needs to continue to fight because that's his life. That's his life support for him. Because he knows too much. He was involved too much in this and all his crowd around him. So this is how bad it is. And this is what Trump needs to understand and investigate. And I think he understands this, how bad this system thought that this war is not just about a war of national security. This war is about money, cleaning out somebody's, cleaning out the warehouses, saying that what we had before, not to show that we were selling off these weapons before even the war. And this is from the American side. So this is how bad it is. And unfortunately, Ukraine was lured into this. Nobody listened to people like me who were talking. I was talking about this. I said for years and years and years that this should never happen. Ukraine should become sovereign and independent. Unfortunately, the coup was made for U.S. money. I was there in Maidan. I saw that money also coming in from the U.S. government. Trucks with the U.S. diplomatic plates coming in and giving away pallets with dollars and hryvnias and whatever. And there was this room stack of money in the trade unions building in the downtown area of Kyiv. And that's for a fact. And that's what the U.S. was backing up this whole coup. That's what U.S. told Ukraine not to touch Crimea. It was basically to get Russians involved in this deeply. And with Crimea, it was good when the Americans told us not to at least shoot because we did not lose anybody there. There was a peaceful transition. Yeah, we lost Crimea. the people voted there to become part of Russia, but Ukraine didn't spill blood. Nobody died, thank God, in that situation. And that's what they lured them in with a shiny coin. And then that's what they wanted to get Russia involved in this with Ukraine. So Ukrainians would hate Russia. They rose their pride, the hatred. There was all psychological warfare, and Ukrainians and the West was involved in this. That's why the people in the West so much listen to CNN and believe that crap, because it was psychological warfare. By the money of the USAID and NED, Newland, and all the people that are Russophobes and hate Russia, and they think they're still living in the Cold War era.
Just to nail this down, you said you were there when they were bringing in pallets of money, and they were using that money effectively to pay off the various actors on the ground in order to push the overthrow.
It was paying out for the buses, for the stage, for the fuel for the stage. Everything had to be for the groceries. Yeah, people were bringing out money on the side. That money was given away to people to pay off for their work. I personally got paid for being part of Maidan by actors of Maidan.
Wow.
And that I can also testify to. I didn't talk about this before because it was too much on my plate with the Bidens involved and everything else. But people know that I was there and I can talk about this. I was there meeting with Newland. I was there coordinating all the international work with Pyatt. And I know how it all happened. So unfortunately, that money, there was a huge room. Not a huge room, but like a room like 40 square meters, stacked with cash right to the top. And the cash was being taken away and given away when we're needed to pay off different actors and for the stage and for the buses to bring in people, to transfer them there. So everything, it was not just a gathering of people to fight democracy. It was a payout. An organized crime situation to overthrow a legitimate president at that time who did make a lot of mistakes, and that's why people actually didn't want to. That's why I didn't want to support Yanukovych at that time. But now I believe if he stayed, we wouldn't have a war. And I'm going to be praying with my wife all my life for what I did, because it was a big mistake being part of that coup. I believe I just came back from the West. We're living there for more than 10 years, and I thought I'm going to be doing something good for Ukraine. But when I saw what was happening after the coup, because I was part of the government, I came out and started my fight for the truth in 2017. And since then, I'm still fighting and people trying to destroy me, but I'm going to still tell the truth.
No, I understand. I mean, I understand the regret associated with being part of effectively a coup that led to this just chaos. Well, this is almost, I guess, like penance, this attempt to try to make up for it. No, I do get the dynamic. What was your communication with Victoria Nuland like? I mean, she looks like a pit bull. She's seems a repugnant human being. What was your feeling from her? What was your communications with her like, if you can go into it?
Yeah, we had a meeting in December of 2013 in the Hyatt in Kiev. It was Ambassador Pyatt, Yatsenyuk was there, Klitschko was there, Technibok, Ambassador Shamshur, and I. The U.S. Embassy asked me to arrange all those so-called leaders of the opposition to meet Nuland there. I arranged them to come, and we had a meeting, and there was a luncheon, but we didn't eat, for everybody. And she actually came in and started swearing in Yanukovych. Like, she swears like a sailor. She's very aggressively.
She looks like it.
She hates everybody. She hates, but she loves herself very much, like most of people. But she loves herself so much that she doesn't care about anybody else, and she's ready to destroy the country from within. And so basically, she was swearing in Yanukovych that he didn't want to pick up the phone from her. But who was she? She was deputy assistant to the head of the Secretary of State, and he was the president of a country. So he doesn't have to pick up a phone from her. She's nobody to him on a level. So basically, she was very aggressive towards Yanukovych, and she was thinking about how to gather more people, how to push more aggressive moves against the acting president at that time, Yanukovych, what to do for the opposition at that time.
Wait. She said she was meeting with Yanukovych and working against Yanukovych.
Yes, she was talking to him over the phone, trying to convince him not to act aggressively against the crowd on Maidan. But at the same time, she was talking to the opposition.
Wow.
Face to face, also saying that she should act more aggressively towards him. So they were playing this bad, good cop situation and trying to put like the pressure on Yanukovych from the crowd,
It's
saying,
like,
"No, but
hey,
we were never
Danny,
involved."
don't respond to the
Yeah,
massive crowd that is trying to overthrow your government, and
yeah,
then go to
yeah.
the massive crowd and say, we need to overthrow this government.
Yes, that's what basically was happening. And she was saying, and I remember the fact when she said, "I want to come on Maidan and give out bread from the stage," and that's what the cookie part happened. I told her it's a bad idea because bread and Jesus, they're not Jesus, thank God, and plus it's not hygiene there to give out bread from your feet like to the people. So we're not in the Roman times. So whether something packed or hygienic, and then the Ambassador Pye confirmed, they supported them and said, "Oh yeah, that's what the cookie part came out." So this is what happened during that meeting in December. Very aggressive woman. I never saw a woman swear so much in my life. Even
Yeah.
people on the streets when you talk to, they're more intelligent than you. And she's a very Russophobic woman. I don't know what happened to her on the Russian ship that she was in the '90s, but she hates Russia very badly. Not even in a good way, but she hates Russia. Not even thinking about it. She just with all her force and body. She understands that she can make money on this, and that's what I think why she's doing
I read
this.
her memoir. Apparently, a Russian peed on her when she was 6 years old, and she never forgave him.
Oh, okay, there you go. We have World War
I'm
III.
totally joking. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's true.
I thought you were saying the truth because I wouldn't believe it if somebody ever did something. Wow. Now we have World War III because somebody in her 6 years old did something to that.
Isn't that
But
explained?
I'm saying, but she's very undiplomatic, and she's smart, but she's very undiplomatic. She's very aggressive, and she's very she hates everybody I think around her. Only she loves herself and her husband, who's making money and made money on the coup in Ukraine.
Did you meet her again before the coup took place in February?
No, I met her only in December, and I wasn't part of the security decoy with Senator McCain came. I was involved in his coming to Kiev also, and Chris Murphy, who went against me in 2020, saying that good that they sanctioned me, even though I was there when he was on the stage. So everything, all of these crowd, they don't believe what they're saying. They don't believe in Ukraine. They're only using Ukraine, and I think they even hate Ukraine. They know that Ukraine's going to lose, but they say, why not use them? They're idiots. Their government sold off. Why not use them? So that's why they hate also Russia so much, and Belarus, because they're independent and sovereign, didn't break under their rule or didn't break under their authority. And the same as Georgia. Georgia didn't break under them and say, we will not fight Russia. We will not be anti-Russia. And
Actually,
they
Georgia
basically,
did.
at one point didn't, but now I'm saying not. Right now. I'm saying about right now what has happened. At one point with Saakashvili, yes, but now Georgia said no. So this is what we have today. Ukraine totally collapsed. All these guys are not going to pay a price for all what they did. Everybody is trying to become anti-Russia or trying to go this way in Europe now and build a force to undermine Trump's peace negotiations with Putin. And this is the reality. And we were talking about this for months and months and months. And I said this before to you in other shows that Zelensky and the Europeans are trying to undermine Trump and his peace talks with President Putin and try to continue this war. And this is what is happening today because the globalists have no other choice to continue this war to make more money and to cover up their crimes.
What do you think when you see liberals, either in Europe or the United States, claim we care about Ukraine, we love Ukraine, but we have to support Ukraine to the last dead Ukrainian? Like, how does that make you feel when you see these people claim not necessarily ownership, but claim as if they are backing Ukrainian interests while watching it be fundamentally destroyed? Like, it's so unrealistic. It's so bizarre.
They're hypocrites. They're hypocrites because whatever they're saying is destroying Ukraine more and more. Yeah. They could have stopped this. Johnson could have not come into Kiev and continued, and we would have peace negotiations in Istanbul. There's blood on his hands, and there's blood on all those liberals' hands who want to continue this war. Because first of all, how can you fight a nuclear country and win? You cannot. That's basically just, you have to understand that. They believe in their own lies that Russian army is bad or it's corrupt, or it's destroyed, or it's still in the post-World War II era that they're going in and with old tanks and the Soviet Union around. But no, it's one of the strongest armies now. And actually, it upgraded itself within the last 2 years of this war and is now much more powerful than any army in the world, having the experience of the war of the 21st century.
Yeah.
Hand-in-hand combat on the ground. So their army is much, much stronger. And the liberals believe in their own lies that they can win Russia. They failed to destroy Russia and break it apart in the first 3 months of the war. And they have to understand, that's why they're so angry. And then they continue this war to make money on this. And so people in Europe and over the globe will not take them out of power because as people start understanding that this war was for nothing. And it's not Afghanistan or even the Middle East where people are dying. It's a great, great tragedy. But this is a war between a nuclear nation, the largest gas and oil reserve country in the world, $75 trillion worth of resources reserved in this country, and has a future more than anybody else in Europe and the West. And they understand that this is a country you cannot fight with. So at the same time, they believe in their lies that they can break it apart. And that is the biggest problem. When you start believing in your own lies, you start to fail and you start to lose. And this is what the West, the liberals, are losing right now. That's why they lost in America, thank God. With these elections and Trump came back to power, maybe he's going to make some common sense back to the world. And hopefully he will understand that this second term, that he will have to do everything he can to make peace. And it's going to be one of maybe the hardest challenges in his life to do this. But he will prevail if he understands what is against him and what is the deep state against him doing in Ukraine, that he has to get them out and not let them undermine him. And the Europeans, I think within the next 5 years, will also change and have conservative government because the liberal government failed their own people, and Europe is now falling apart because of their so-called liberal ideas and agenda to continue this war in Ukraine because they believe in their own lies. And Europe is now totally in total destruction. Zero growth economics in France, zero growth economics in Germany. The leaders there are fully controlled by the globalists, and that's where we are today. The gas that they're buying from the U.S. is 3 times more expensive. Yeah. And as I said, now the main idea is U.S. and Russia needs to sit down on a table, make a good work for them between themselves. I've been talking about the Arctic for the last 3-4 years. That's a thing that they will hopefully agree on and work together. Latin America, they will agree and work together. I think that's Russia's ready to compromise. The problem is the warmongers don't want to compromise because they have no other choice because they're fighting for their lives now.
And they've cognitively committed to this war. I mean, like it's astonishing to me to watch these guys in a room by themselves talk about all of the things that they're going to do, even though they had no power to do it. It's bizarre. There's something that you said. You said you were told not to touch Crimea. Who told you not to touch Crimea?
The U.S. government at the time. The Pentagon
in the U.S. government.
I was already an advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, overseeing law enforcement and Ukrainian intel. And we were talking to the deputy head of the Pentagon, the director of CIA, Brennan, and national security advisors within the White House, and also the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, Zentas, all that crowd. We were talking to different delegations, and they gave an order to the acting so-called president at the time, Turchinov, not to fire in Crimea. And they basically tried to tell us that the green men in Crimea were now Russian military, to give them more evidence of the Russian military, even though the U.S. knew that was happening. I was in contact with the White House in February 2014, there was a delegation from the Ukrainian diaspora. They called me from Biden's office and said, Ukraine is going to lose Crimea. And this was February 20th of 2014. And I didn't believe it at the time. The Americans did. And they told us not to get involved. So they tried to lure this in to get Russia involved. And they used this situation to try to make the civil war between Russia and Ukraine, and in Donbass, the civil war between Russians and Ukrainians. and to build up the hatred towards Russia, that Russia took something from Ukraine away, even without any bullets fired.
Wait,
No
how
bullets
did
were
they
fired.
know? I'm sorry to interrupt. How did they know that Russia was going to take Crimea?
It was. We have to understand that Crimea was always a sacred place for the Russian fleet,
Oh, no, I
and there
get
was.
that. I'm just saying, how did America know in advance that Russia was going to take it?
I think you should ask the Americans this. They were. I just got a phone call from Biden's office from the diaspora that was there talking to him during the coup in Ukraine, and
That's
that's what they were told. So I don't know who knew. I think the intel was working. The U.S. intel also works. One of
yeah,
the strongest intel groups is the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese now, I think. So they are doing their job. So they know what's happening,
they knew.
and so they understood that this is going to be the next phase of Russia's going to do. They're going to try to protect their people there because there's a lot of which. What happened is within the last 30 years, Ukraine did nothing to invest in Crimea or in Eastern Europe or Eastern Ukraine.
Mhm.
Ukraine elites and government in Crimea actually put it into a total almost destruction. There was no roads. The Crimea was falling apart. The hotels there, the government-owned hotels, were falling apart. You cannot have lived there. Like basically, it's all a total destruction. No investments. A lot of people holding Russian passports in that territory, and a lot of people, more than 90%, they're saying that they are Russian.
Right.
And so this was the situation that Ukraine was becoming too. So Ukraine lost Crimea because they didn't do anything within their 30 years of independence to keep Crimea part of Ukraine. If they could have invested money, invested into politics, invested into political strategy there, invested into show that Ukraine is good, invested into roads, infrastructure, maybe people wouldn't want to leave. But
Yeah.
Ukraine didn't do anything. The same thing with Donbass. Ukraine only used Donbass to feed itself with the coal and the mineral reserves there and the gas to feed Ukraine. They didn't invest anything. Like in Donbass and Donetsk, the sewer pipe system was never updated from 1970s.
Really?
And when Ukraine became independent, they didn't know the roads were terrible, total destruction. The oligarchs were just feeding from Donbass. Nothing was done. And people saw it. People living there said, oh, so Ukraine is going to tell us what to do, which language to speak. What did they do within the 30 years of independence to make it better for us to live? We have no roads, no gas, nothing. We're basically have no sewage system which is working, no water. What like there was water, but basically there was problems with it time to time. In a big city like Donetsk, million people living there. People think, why do we have to support this? And they're telling us what to do, and we have to support the coup. No. So people basically said, we don't want to be part of this. We see that the Russian people are living better than us. Ukraine was one of the poorest countries. Belarus had a better life style than in Ukraine and better GDP. Russia, much better GDP. People are saying this and say, all these post-Soviet countries are living better than us. Why do we have to be going to Europe if we can live a life with our own people? And Ukraine never did anything to invest in us, and we're going to go this way. So it was Ukraine's fault for not supporting its own people. The last 30, they had a chance, they didn't, and this is why this war started. This is why the civil war started, because the Ukrainian military started to shell Ukrainians in the east because they wanted to protest. But at the same time, in Kiev, if a police officer would hit a protester who threw a rock at him with a stick, he's going to go to jail or shot, or he has to go and face the hog court, etc. That's crazy. But I'm saying when people came out there in eastern Ukraine to say we don't want to be Ukrainianized, we want to speak Russian, they were shelled with artillery by the order of the director of CIA, Brennan. This is what the reality is today. And nobody talked about it. The West kept quiet because this is the agenda. The West needed this war to start. And that's what
Andrii,
Trump understands this. And Vance understands this.
That story was buried. Like, meaning that wasn't something that they talked about, even when they talk about it today. It gets buried in Western media. It's astonishing the way they were able to basically silence all of this. Andrii, man, thank you for this. Very informative today. And I can imagine that we have a fantastic crowd here we hit like 700. It is fascinating because a lot of what you're saying is from personal experience. And so when you're explaining it from, I met this person. I was there when this happens. That's extraordinarily informative. And I really do appreciate it. Andrii TELIZHENKO, he's a Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat and a really good friend of the show. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamarl. Thank you, everybody. All the best, and God bless you.
You too. Be safe. Have a good one. Fantastic guest. Fantastic guest. Nothing else to say. Fantastic guest. I mean, the notion that he was there with that bulldog of a woman, Victoria Nuland, it sounds like her personality is exactly what you would think her personality is. A repugnant degenerate that has no issue, just a full sociopath in the way that she engages. She's out there handing out cookies with bad breath and effectively aging them on into a war. It's astonishing. Shout out to him. I really appreciate Andrii on that one. To keep this boat rocking, I am going to go to my next guest in a very short moment. We're joined. There we are. We are joined. Good friend of the show, Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin is a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In his book, Custom Reality and You, he explores a world where profit is the driving force. He also has the other book, Woke. Check him out.
Ouroboros. It's a tough word, and I do understand.
So what's the word again?
It's Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its own tail.
Ouroboros. Just, yeah. How you doing, man?
It's not a common word, but I have noticed more people using it.
Well, that's because you use it for the book. And so have you ever noticed, it's like, that's a nice red car. Oh my God, look at all these red cars. It becomes that, right? It's like the moment you hear the word used once, you hear it all the time. How you doing, Peter?
No, there's actually a word for that, but I don't remember what it is right now.
Oh, right. That sense of seeing those things over and over again.
Yeah.
How you doing? You doing okay?
I'm good. How about yourself, Jamarl?
I am doing good. I my lifeblood is news. And so when something happens, it's super interesting. When nothing happens, it's pulling teeth. And so the fact of Trump and Zelensky flipping out, it writes itself. It just writes itself. Like the moment that I saw it, I was like, okay, I need a Ukrainian, I need Mark, and we're going to go from there. And let both just go. Because it's astonishing. Like this changeover from Joe Biden, where anytime Zelensky farted, Joe Biden was there to sniff it. And to Trump, where he's like, just hates him. Like you can tell he just dislikes him. From in the meeting, he's just sitting there just despondent. It's like, God, I have to talk to this guy. And apparently the reporting was that Donald Trump was trying to cancel the meeting. Zelensky was pissed off because he wasn't getting what he wanted with the deal. Because what Zelensky wanted was security guarantees. And Trump is like, no, I'm not getting America involved in a war. Are you out of your mind? And Europe, effectively, Boris Johnson was like, look, just take the deal. Meaning even if you don't get security guarantees, the United States has a vested interest if indeed it's getting 50% of everything that comes out of the land. And they keep calling it a mineral deal. And I'm like, this is not a mineral deal. It was oil, gas, hydrocarbons, minerals, rare earth minerals, and then it had any other extracted product for the foreseeable future. I didn't even see a time scale on it. It was just, we will own 50% of Ukraine. Now, there's a bit of diciness in that, just because, for one, Ukraine signed a 100-year security guarantee deal with the UK, which is fascinating to me because the UK came here begging Donald Trump to fight in Ukraine. So it's like, wait a minute. So you got a loan on a loan, or you got insurance policy on insurance policy? Like the bank gets an insurance policy, and then that bank gets another insurance policy. And it's like, okay, dude,
and then they make a derivative based on if that insurance policy is triggered, and you can buy that.
But it's like when Keir Starmer was asked directly by Donald Trump, which is, I love the scene, because Trump turns to Starmer and said, well, hey, you can fight the Russians on your own, right? And everybody in the room laughs. Everybody in the room laughs. It's just outrageous to me. I have feelings about this war. And I know a lot of people believe, well, Jamarl feels this way because he worked at Sputnik and he wants to get his job back. Dude, I mean, that's the most.
Those are two separate issues, in my opinion.
they're not exactly separate, but that's not my motivation. My motivation is, oh my God, all of these people are dying. And the shock of it. Like I was at this, I would tell you, I was naive. I'm talking too much, Peter. I'm sorry.
No,
I was naive. When I started working at the station, we started talking about Nord Stream. And I remember I kept thinking to myself, why are we talking about this fucking pipeline? Like, why is this pipeline so important? And then the war starts. And nobody at the station believed Russia was going to go in. And I started thinking to myself, why did I get that wrong? And why is all of these Americans getting it wrong? And what I realized was it's because we're Americans. We don't have an enemy at our gate. We don't have, we haven't been invaded all of these times in the way that Russia has. It's a different mindset. And when I started to tilt my mindset, this stuff started to make more sense. But I got to be honest, I was shocked by the whole thing. This is a catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives. And I can't wrap my head around it. I can't, I understand why, like I understand the mechanics, but even understanding mechanics doesn't change the fact that we pushed a country into a conflict that got 1 million people killed and untold numbers of people maimed, destroyed, etc. I can't wrap my head around that. I can't countenance that. Even if I don't get my job back, that's secondary to the point that this is a war that needs to stop. I just can't fathom
It's
it.
nuts. It's honestly insane. And the thing, I think you made the right point in that we're Americans and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around this. And to some extent, you either have to like be put in a position like you said, got a job with an organization, more or less put different information in front of your face. And that changes your perspective a little bit. Or you have to start paying attention to news sources that are completely different. You have to start essentially just taking whatever the state says as a lie. Like you have to have a reason for that. Something has to tell you like, oh, we're being told the wrong thing by the state about what's going on there. Like people are just dying for no good reason. Well, for the reason that they want to be, they have been after Russia the entire time. Like it's not that it changed over from the Soviet Union collapsed, and the whole thing was they wanted to balkanize the country, and they wanted a bunch of small capitalist nations and that they can easily control through alliances and economic pressure. It's just it didn't happen, and that's what they've always wanted to happen. They still want it to happen, and that's ultimately like the problem is they don't. Like that's what this whole Ukraine thing is. It was about expanding NATO. It was about bringing that closer to Russia. And the reason they were bombing the Donbass, I mean, it's all essentially tied to that very, very old goal that I'm not even completely sure everybody who is involved with fully understands, because a lot of them were not alive at the time when that goal, like the NATO started after World War II. Shortly after World War II, and that that's really why they're like NATO as its original implementation is why all of this stuff is happening. And it's just astounding because so many people are probably not even thinking about it from that perspective who are involved with this. They're probably not thinking about the idea that this is ultimately about, and this is why so many people think that the war started in 2022. Rather than in 2014, or you could argue much sooner.
You know what's wild about that? When I had it, Europe is in a fantasy land, and I think the same thing with me when I was looking at this at first. I think it's affected Europe also, where they're so accustomed to Europe as a garden and all of this other stuff that they don't fully accept the gravity that they could start a third world war. And this is wild considering the fact that Europe started 2 other world wars. And it's pushing in this direction. I was talking to my ex.
It's true.
It's true. I was talking to my ex. She's from Austria, and she is on this European fantasy land thing. And it was pissing me off so much on the phone, right? Because I'm like, you are in a fantasy. What you want is secondary to the fact that you lost the war. How are you? And then I got brutal, right? I'm like, you started. When I'm going with you, I'm in brutal mode. You started 2 world wars. How are you pissing on the tree trying to start another one. It's wild. I'm sorry. I want to go. One of the fascinating things was how fast Lindsey Graham dropped Zelensky. Lindsey Graham was the guy who was telling Trump, there's so many rare earth minerals there, Trump. We can't leave it to the Russians. All right, Lindsey Graham went on Fox News, and I want to get your take on this. I love this. Lindsey Graham said this. And by the way, Lindsey Graham is a warmonger, just so everybody knows. In case you were unclear, he is a John McCain warmonger who was full-throatedly backing the Ukraine project. In fact, he was even one of those people who said, look, what's the issue? All these people are dying. Yeah, but they're not Americans. And the money is coming back to us in weapons. So, the world is great. Listen how fast this has changed since that meeting with Zelensky, Vance, and Trump.
Met with Zelensky this morning. I urged him to stay on message, be grateful, be thankful. We'll talk about details of security guarantees later. Keep it upbeat, keep it positive. It was absolute, utter disaster. The question for me is he redeemable in the eyes of Americans? Most Americans witnessing what they saw today would not want Zelensky to be their business partner, including me. And I've been to Ukraine 9 times since the war started. I met with him this morning. President Trump I talked to last night, he was upbeat about the deal. I've never been more proud of President Trump for showing the American people in the world, you don't trifle with this man. He was very positive. He was very upbeat. He wanted to get a ceasefire. He wants to end the war. And Zelensky felt like he needed to debate Trump in the Oval Office. JD was awesome.
That is amazing. Like, Trump has bent these people into form. Like, if you listen to Rubio is like, we got to end the war. We got to end the war. This is about peace. Yeah. And it's like, is that Rubio saying that?
Yeah. No, Rubio is, he has not acted like how I have expected him to act at all.
No, Trump has bent these people into form. I have a foreign policy. I am hiring you to explicitly push my foreign policy. And JD Vance has been fantastic. That is Trump's pit bull. He is a Trump whisperer, like, meaning he articulates stuff that Trump is saying more eloquent and far more concise than Trump does. And so it's like, if Trump is sitting there, he is a much better communicator. Lindsey Graham said, I met with Zelensky 9 times. I've been to Ukraine 9 times. He said, I met with Zelensky this morning. I would not hire him to be my business partner, let alone, like, he just, hot potato, dropped.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there is a lot of people who have tried to represent this as some kind of a disaster, but the fact is, this is how a president should react to somebody who is ultimately getting something out of us and is snapping back for no real reason other than, like, they want more. Like, well, I'm sorry.
There is a reason. I mean, from Zelensky's point of view, it's like, you led me into this war. Yeah. You told me you were going to back me for as long as it takes. Hell, you told me I was even going to win. And now you're turning around and saying, I want half of everything that comes out of the ground, and you're not giving me anything for it. Like, I get it from his point of view.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
But it's also like literally us ensuring that things survive there. That's the other issue. Like, we wanted a lot out of that deal, but they wanted a lot out of that deal, to be frank. The Biden administration, as far as I'm concerned, very much led them astray in terms of promises and in terms of, I mean, we did give them a lot of money for this war, and that was a big problem. And liberals, the supposed anti-war party, the Democrats,
there isn't one.
The people who were against Bush on the grounds of war, they decided that war is great. Money comes from war, and so war is good. I mean, obviously, it's more complicated than that. You have imperialism tied up into that interest very much, but at the same time, it's ultimately just this party that claims to be one thing isn't that thing and proves that it's not that thing. And then somebody who, for whatever reason, and I I'm not going to tell you I think that all of Trump's reasoning here is correct. I don't think that. I think that there are miscalculations, because I think some of it has to do with diverting money to Israel, which I don't like.
Oh, really? You think it's that? See, I think. Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think if we free up some resources in Ukraine, we end up with the ability to put some more resources in Israel, and I have a feeling that's part of where we're going with this. But there's also the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of people dying, and okay, so even from a practical standpoint, let's say I agree with empire. Let's say I think that all of that stuff is good and fine and we should be in control. From a practical standpoint, we shouldn't want hundreds of thousands of people dying, purely from the perspective that it creates a situation in which there's instability, and also it makes us look bad, because ultimately we're the ones funding it.
Right.
And I think that's not the reasons that I am personally opposed to war. I think that war is evil. I think that it's like the idea of hundreds of thousands of people dying for fighting over a thing where we're like, well, we just want to make sure that NATO is allowed to be up on Russia's border. So maybe one day we'll have the pressure to put them to crack up the nation and separate them a little bit more. It's like, I think that's terrible. I think that's just legitimately an awful reason to do anything that has dire consequences for anyone on any level. Like, if 5 people died, that is not a good justification, you know?
Agreed.
So, but even from that utilitarian perspective, like I said, it makes us look bad. We're funding this. We're creating. It's like, from a utilitarian perspective, an empire that wants to maintain its power partly has to do so on image. And it's very hard to maintain that element of it, the ideological justification for us being the big country in the world. If it makes people's lives worse or removes their ability to have lives, that it creates discontent. And ultimately, like, just even from that perspective, it's not wise to just like randomly engage in wars, as much as, like, let's say we could win this. Let's say we could fund Ukraine into being able to beat a country that, you know, is oil rich and has all the money that it needs to, even despite sanctions and everything that we could say about Russia. Let's say that we could win, that they could win. It's still not wise, because you're still using their lives to advance what is clearly your agenda. And eventually that causes discontent with people. It's just, we can't be that. Even if you think that what the world is now is good and it should stay that way, you can't just engage in these like regime change wars and trying to maintain power in bases. There's 800 some military bases around the world, the United States. You can't maintain that with this sort of cavalier, we're in control, we can just kill or have people get killed for whatever reason, and it's fine. It eventually isn't fine, you know?
And by the way, and lose. Yes. And like, it's like, you got all these people killed and didn't even win, right?
Yeah.
And
I was giving you as a hypothetical scenario where that's not what's happening, but it is what's happening.
It's like, and you lose. And then to make it even worse, the boogeyman that you were terrified of is now not just a boogeyman, it is a superpowered boogeyman, because it's been killing and dying for the last 3 years with a military that went from 150,000 to like 1 million men, battle hardened. And so it's like, not only did you lose, not only did you put all of this money out for that loss, not only did you get all these people killed, the thing that you were terrified of is monstrous at this moment.
It's much stronger now.
It's much stronger. And so it's like, what was it for? Like, I just, God, man, it kills me. Like, war is typically a bad thing. And I feel weird having to argue that this is a good thing that Trump is ending the war. And yet I find myself having to argue, hey, it's actually good that Trump is ending the war. Yeah, but he's an ogre. You say that to say what? You said to say what?
So what's good to have is a nice, well-spoken, soft-spoken man who causes more war. Like,
right.
That's what they want, obviously.
Right.
Like, to me, and I've said this many times. I just had a discussion with somebody who doesn't quite didn't really, has kind of been out of politics for a while and doesn't really understand where Trump is coming from, or why people like you or me would say Trump is doing something good at all, just because, you know, they're not really thinking about politics. They're doing things elsewhere in their life. And I kind of had to explain, like, you know, I don't agree with Donald Trump on a ton of stuff, but like, this is objectively the things that we want a president to do, as long as there's a president. Like, yeah, we want less wars. We want more peace. And no, it's not ideal, the conditions that this reduction in fighting, it's not ideal how it's coming about. It's not ideal where it's going to go, but you know, escalating tensions is not what we want on the worldwide stage. It's just something that can only lead to worse and worse conditions for everybody on the planet. And we don't want that.
And they need to acknowledge that the reason why the U.S. is taking this position is because we lost. Like, Trump wouldn't be taking this position if we won or if we were winning. He's taking a position because the U.S. lost. And his thought is, all right, we need to put this to bed. And as he was telling Zelensky, dude, your bargaining hand is improved by being with us. Meaning, absolutely. I can let you drop and collapse on the battlefield, or you can negotiate with us where we have more things to negotiate than the war. If you're sticking your negotiations specifically to the war, well, you have nothing to negotiate. You have no chips, you have no cards. If you're with us, okay, well, we can negotiate sanctions, we can negotiate Middle East policy, we can negotiate stuff about Iran, meaning there are far more things that we could put on the table to help Ukraine in the end from a bargaining position, as opposed to you just dying on the battlefield. And Zelensky is, you know, flipping out at the president. It's just amazing. I've never seen anything like that. I swear.
I mean, that whole event, like, they tried to act like Vance and Trump are bullying the guy, but like, if you watch the whole thing, it's very clear that he's just he's trying the whole time, and he's trying to do it in a manner where he doesn't look like he's escalated it. Which, to me, the passive aggression is much worse than aggression. I hate passive aggression. Yeah, nothing makes me more mad than passive aggression.
Yeah, like, own it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of and I think that's the reason why liberals have been saying, "Oh, he didn't try to start anything." It's like, no. You all know what gaslighting is and how to do it.
And by the way, he flipped out. I mean, it was a question that went to one of them, or some Trump was like, last question, and when it came up with the deal, Zelensky said something. I mean, because he was annoyed, right? From his point of view.
Yeah, he was annoyed and he was getting snippy.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted security guarantees. Trump kept telling him no. They kept telling him no. And he flipped out and then gets into a back and forth where Trump is like shouting him down because this is fascinating.
It was, I got to say, I haven't seen anything like that. My entire life at this point. Like, you never see world leaders in the Oval Office having a peace meeting that ends in them yelling at each other.
Yeah. Usually that stuff is behind the scenes. And Vance even pointed out, it's like, dude, this is not the place to have this conversation. Like, meaning having this conversation from the press like this, it's not the point. Vance, absolutely. Though, he went after Keir Starmer. He went after Zelensky directly, where he is like literally in the man's, I am fascinated by the dynamic. When Trump first picked Vance, I remember Malik was like, this pick sucks. It's like, this is not the guy. And over time, Malik was warming to him. And for me, look, I know in domestic, I'm not going to get anything I want in a domestic sense. Sure. I do like it a bit where his attack dog, who can coherently make a point, makes that point directly to Zelensky, almost like an intervention. Like, you are losing. How are you talking to me right now about this, like this? Oh, it's fascinating.
SNL was doing this to make fun of him, but you just reminded me of the Willy Wonka thing. You lose. Like, they had Vance literally do the Willy Wonka line to make fun of Vance, and it's no, that's kind of what happened here.
Yeah, it's literally what happened, right? You can't even make a parody of it. Like, the event itself is a parody. Ron DeSantis, I want to get your take on this. I'm fascinated, and I really want to get your take on this. Listen to DeSantis. He's coming out with a new initiative about property taxes.
Subject their citizens to higher taxes, such as higher property taxes, to pay for these spending habits. And, these property taxes, it's like you buy a home, you buy land, maybe you buy the home outright, but maybe you pay off a mortgage over 30 years. And then, okay, you've paid off the mortgage, you bought the land, you've been taxed many times. It's like, is it your property or not? Just for being on your property, you got to write a check to the government every year. You're basically paying rent to the government to live on your own property. And our homestead exemption is not strong enough to help these folks because the property gets assessed so high. And that's the thing. If you buy a home for $300,000 and there's certain tax, well, then what? 10 years later, they say it's worth $700,000. And so, and they say, there's homestead stuff that helps protect you to a certain extent, but you're paying more. And a lot of people can't afford that. So I think that that's a big issue. And I know we're going to be really looking at ways to bring people relief from that, because I think it's been really something that's pinching a lot of homeowners, particularly seniors on fixed income. But the reality is people have seen, and this is not the state, we don't control this, we've not allowed any of that stuff to happen. We've been cutting taxes, but people have seen their property tax liability go up over these last.
Give me a take on this. As from a lefty point of view, where he is effectively making this argument like, look, people buy their houses and then they have to pay these exorbitant prices to the government going forward for 30 years or forever, I suppose. And it's like, that's effectively rent going to the government. And people who are older, especially if you're talking about Florida, where you have a lot of older residents in Florida, maybe they can't afford it. I mean, they end up on Social Security after purchasing their house. And granted, some of these people are rich, right? So if you're talking about a $20 million house, okay, that guy can afford it.
Yeah.
But if you talk about just a regular average person, let's say my mom has a house, or my grandmother, good example. My grandmother had the house since a year after I was born. And she had that house the entire time, paid the house off. And then it becomes, okay, now you have to pay property taxes on the house for the foreseeable future. But the person is only making Social Security wages. Okay, so now how do you pay for the house? My mom had to sell that house because she couldn't afford it when my grandmother passed. Because again, you have to continuously pay property tax on the house. You have to. What do you take for that? He's a Republican, so I'm skeptical by definition. I assume this is something for the rich. But is this one of those things like no tax on tips? Is it a positive? Give me your lefty take on this, because I don't quite know. I might be missing something.
To me, he is speaking to something that actually does pinch a person's pocket. Lots of P's in that sentence. But it does actually do that to a normal person who is not rich. To me, when I hear this kind of stuff, I know that there's a lot of nuance, because you don't really have the ability to not have taxes, at least as long as we have the economic system we have.
Yes.
We have an economic system where, in order for there to be social services, resources have to be allotted to the government. And in order to have resources allotted to the government, we have to pay into the government on some level.
Right.
But ultimately, like if we're talking long-term Star Trek utopia stuff, what he's saying here is something that really shouldn't exist. If we're going to be completely clear, if we had an economic system that worked, this wouldn't be even something we're talking about. That's the way I look at it. I see this, and yes, he's describing a real problem, but ultimately, like you said, Ron DeSantis is somebody who is going to be searching for solutions for rich people.
Yes.
So it's not going, while he is outlining a problem that affects people who have less money, which, by the way, a lot of those people aren't even allowed to own property. So it's not even, we're in a point where 50% of renters can't afford rent. Like we're progressively getting further and further away from the ability to even get screwed by the government in this way.
Because when I heard this, my first thought was like, yeah, but why do I care? I don't own a house.
Yeah.
And the majority of people don't own a house. And so it's like, it puts me in mind of the argument when they talk about paying off student loans. And you have some people who are like, well, I don't have student loans, so why do I care about this? Why am I for this? I feel like that about it, but I don't want to feel like that about it because that's cynical if I am getting it wrong, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to be that guy who says, well, why should she get $15 an hour? I do this and I only make $15 an hour, as opposed to we should both be making more.
Yes.
Like this. I feel like this is a policy for the rich. I could be wrong, but I feel that way because that seems to be the direction that Republicans always go. Like, so Trump wants to pass tax cuts. Okay, yeah, going to be, he's going to increase my taxes, but he's going to cut the taxes for the rich.
He's going to increase your taxes, or money's going to be worth less, so the taxes just hurt you more.
Yes.
one way or the other.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's my point with this. Is this yes or no if you were in Florida for this? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. I
lived in Florida for several years, and I rented the whole time. So I don't know. It wouldn't affect me in any way. So materially, I can't really give you like an invested answer. Do you know what I probably, I don't know if I will ever own a house. Like, I even do well economically speaking, but like, it is not wise for me to purchase a house. First off, the houses are crazy expensive at this point in my life. They're cost way more than they should cost. Yeah. And second off, I just get put in the same situation in terms of rent where I'm paying into something for 30 years and I'm 40. I'll be 70 when I pay off a mortgage. So it's like, I don't know. Is that really worth it at this point? I really don't know. But if I owned property in Florida, it would, I'll say this, it would signify that I'm doing a lot better economically than I currently am. Yeah. And I would guess that I would probably be for that, because the point that I would have to be at in order to own property in Florida, I would have to be in the area that would probably benefit most from whatever DeSantis cooks up. So
I don't think I would take issue with this if there was a cutoff. Like if it was people who make
I completely agree with you. Like, give it to it for up to a certain value of property. Like, I mean, granted, it has to index to inflation, because if we index everything to inflation and everything was just tied to like a fixed set of value that is created by labor, ultimately, we would see a very different economic situation in terms of debt and all of these types of things. I don't think this kind of thing would be actually something that we're afraid of the unintended consequences of. But yeah, no, I think it wouldn't bother me, but like part of that is that internally I can't even imagine owning property.
Yeah. I thought about it through the lens of, okay, I don't trust Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
I'm assuming this is for the rich somehow.
Yeah, it probably is.
If there was a cutoff of, if you make less than a certain amount, then this comes into play. Then no issue with it. But see, that's the rub. As you pointed out, the government needs money to operate. And when Donald Trump is doing the no tax on tip stuff, the thing was like $10 trillion or $20 trillion, some insane number. Even though
over 10 years, it really adds up.
Yeah. Even though as a lefty, I'm like, I'm okay with that. Like, meaning, how can I say this? My bias is that I want more money in people's pockets, especially people who are poor. And somebody who's a waiter may make $2.50 an hour. And let's say for the moment, though, that with tips added, they make $60,000 an hour. Okay, well, that means that everything beyond the $2.50 is just not taxed. And if you're talking about the overwhelming majority of people who work service jobs, that adds up. That
very much, because it's not just waiters, it's baristas, it's people selling you phones. Like some of those places have tip jars now. It's very weird. It's honestly, I saw one in one of those places and I was like, a tip jar?
Yeah, it's like, why is this here? Why is this here? You're not getting a tip from me.
Yeah, I was like, that's. But everywhere you go, you have a little tip thing in the, everybody's using the tablet thing now to take your money, and it's got a tip thing, and they all want tips, And
YouTube. Everybody that is effectively a tip, right? I mean, like,
okay, I'm for it. I'm for it.
Right, exactly.
I'm for it.
Now, what's interesting about this is the same impetus.
Super chats are tax-free? Come on. Yes.
That was my thought. I mean, my thought was like,
let's go.
Tips. Super chats are tips. Okay, so now this puts us in the same boat that rich people are in, where they don't want taxes, even though it hurts the government for not having taxes.
I'm with it. Yes, it is. But at the same time, it's not because you or I are rich.
I know, but we're talking
It's
about a
different.
policy that's going to add like
think
$30
about-
trillion in 10 years.
Well, yes, and this is the problem fundamentally. Then you have to start thinking about it. Like, the problem isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily the tax. Like, tax itself is not necessarily the problem. It's the economic system that's the problem. That's
Agreed.
set up this way that we need to do things to poor people like this in order to sustain programs that help poor people.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we need to hit, like, the reason you or I would be invested in that super chat thing is because, in theory, traffic itself doesn't really pay that much. Like, we rely on, like, I rely on things like Patreon or super chats. I don't do a lot of live, but like, I get the super thanks, which is the video equivalent of that. That's also a tip. And if all that is covered as non-taxable income, like, that would be awesome. I would be so happy about that, because seriously, that would, I work in a job, as do you, we work in a job that we aren't really given the ability, because, in a traditional job where you work an hourly wage, you know what is taken out, because it's taken out of your paycheck by your employer and it's put aside for your taxes. You often get a tax return.
Right.
I don't. I pay money into the IRS every year because I make money and none of that is withheld.
Right.
And often I need that money. I need it now. And I really, all people need the money now. Whatever money they can get from where they get their money, they need it. Like, it's not like as much. Like I said, I'm doing economically well, but it's not like I live in a world of vast abundance in which I can press the button and the thing materializes for me. I don't get that. I don't have that. So yeah, I mean, the contradiction there, it's class. Like, the taxes are ultimately something that benefits the owning class, the financial capital that is, basically making an economy based on circulating debt. Like, that's essentially the world we live in. That's how the economy is managed here. And most of the value generation is done imperially throughout the world by, economically or just straightforwardly conquering some other nation and having it subordinate to our country.
No, man, I agree with you. We
need change. We need a government of action that fights for working families, as my colleague Caleb Maupin always says.
I mean, we do. But this is kind of a phony way to do it, right? I mean, like, oh God, man, I hate saying that because you're right. It's when I was doing the job on the radio, okay, where they pull taxes out, it's a regular job. The moment that job goes away, okay, now you're trying to figure it out without a paycheck. And the amount that you get from YouTube is so, I don't know, but is very small.
It's not big for me either.
Yeah, it's not big, right? So you're barely making ends meet all of a sudden, immediately, the moment that you lose the job.
I have other employment I do on top of everything else.
Oh, well, good.
That's how I make ends meet.
Well,
I couldn't make ends meet
so
in that person.
fast, because when we lost the job, it was like October 15th, and it was like, okay, this is it. No more paychecks, no more anything else. It just all stopped. And so it's like you have to unravel your life because you're stuck at your apartment for another 2 weeks. You're paying DC prices for everything for those 2 months. And it's like, oh, this is painful. It's bleeding. I'm bleeding. And then you're like, okay, well, I need to build up the channel and everything else. So I guess my point is the no tax on tip stuff would be a big deal. But it's $30 trillion. Like, how do I,
by the way, is used again essentially it exists to make the lives, those people's lives easier. And I'm using the scare quotes very intentionally here because those programs are also often contingent on means testing or things like that. But allegedly, they're taking the money to put money in the same people's pockets.
Yes.
So like, those programs are necessary. Like, at this point, there's people that rely on them. SNAP, for instance, it is not something I would advocate cutting in any way.
Right.
But at the same time, if the people who are on SNAP, a lot of those people are service workers or Uber drivers, by the way, they're in a similar tax situation. A lot of those people work those types of jobs. If they didn't have that extra amount taken out of their pocket at whatever point, would they need SNAP? I don't know.
Oh, that's the interesting thing. And that's the Republican argument, right? They want people working. And because they want people working, they want more money in their pockets. I guess the catch is this something that the American public is going to be on board with?
No,
I mean,
because we don't know the consequences. That's the thing. We could say all day long, like, would they need SNAP? I'm saying that as a hypothetical. Like, are we just circulating money for the sake of it? It's a valid question, but ultimately, would I advocate for getting rid of SNAP? Absolutely not, because it is a keen possibility that the answer is yes, they would still need SNAP. But still, the problem here is that we have a system that necessitates these types of contradictions. These aren't things that we can avoid, and there's not going to be an answer for it until we address these things at a fundamental economic system level. Like, there are aspects of what we live in that absolutely cannot persist if we want to solve these issues. If we want to keep these issues around, which, by the way, I think we know of two parties that do, the ones that control everything. If we want to resolve anything, we have to make changes in terms of how things work. And that's a discussion that's very difficult to have in short terms, because it's not something that anybody agrees on. Like, there are people that will, like, a lot of people will tell you, yes, things absolutely have to fundamentally change. Well, how? Well, we just have to destroy 1/3 of the government. It has to be gone. And it's like, well, I get that on some level, because again, the same conversation we're having revolves around the same kinds of contradictions. But that's also thinking of government in the exact same way we are at the moment. And if we started fundamentally changing things, there's no guarantee that government looks like it looks right now.
Right. No, really good point. Let's go to polling. And this will be the last thing. CNN.
Polling.
Yes. Love it. So CNN did polling on Donald Trump on whether or not the American public accepts what's taking place currently. I mean, look, Donald Trump has been hyperactive. He has been going, firing workers left and right, sending letters saying, hey, tell me what you do for a living, which is just wild to me that you're sending like 1 million letters or something like that. They have been going after cutting all over the place, even trying to cut the military budget at this point. Apparently military stocks collapsed because Trump was going after them. Tariffs, ending program. He has been hyperactive. Doge has been all over the place. And so the CNN was yeah, right. So CNN was like, okay, American, what do you believe of Donald Trump's actions? So this is, I'm not going to show CNN reporting on it because they're going to cut my video, but I will show the polling results itself.
Okay.
And this is, CNN could be dicks about the whole.
This is CNN's polling.
This is CNN poll. So they conducted this poll on February 24th to 28th. And it says, effectively, do you approve or disapprove of of Trump? 90% of Republicans said yes. 90% of Republicans said yes, he's great. 10% disapprove. Independents, 41% approve, 59% disapprove. And of Democrats, 10% approve, 90% disapprove. So what's really is the middle, the independents, where you get the 59, 41%. Then they asked whether they think the country is going in the right direction or wrong direction. 45% said the wrong direction. 39% said the right direction. 15% are unsure. Who are these unsure people? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, oftentimes when that poll takes place, that number is usually higher about going in the wrong direction. I've seen that number going up to as high as 70%.
Yeah.
So even though the wrong direction is 45%, usually that number is much higher.
Yes, very much. I mean, you're an independent for a reason, because you do not see the Democrats or Republicans as doing the right thing.
Exactly. So Trump at 39% is not ridiculous in comparison to what it was like under Biden or something like that. What do you think is going on? Do you think the American public, that he's split? So my hypothesis is that Trump is splitting the baby on this stuff. Usually the idea is that the left is more prone to not wanting wars. Whereas now That's not the case. You have warmongers on the right who's on the left who are still egging on the war. Whereas in this case, you get Donald Trump saying, I want to stop wars. I don't want to start them. So on some level, I would imagine the American public says, yes, we want to stop wars too. We don't want to start wars either. So maybe he gets a contingent who says, okay, he is doing what he said he's going to do on this front. But then they see him firing workers and they're like, okay, we don't like that. We don't like you going after Medicaid. We don't like you going after public services. That's not why you were elected. So he ends up with this kind of bifurcation of people who in some respects like them, in some respects don't. I put myself in that box where I'm like, internationally, great job.
Internationally, I'm quite happy with what's going on with him.
Domestically, trash.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, it's horrific. Give me your take on that, though. I mean, because I would imagine the American public bought somebody in because they wanted fundamental change. And when they see RFK or when they see Tulsi Gabbard, they think that's different. That's not the same.
Or just Trump yelling at Zelensky, man. That's like I said, I've never seen that in my life.
Exactly.
That's different. It's arguable that to some people that it's not great, but like that's also, in my opinion, pretty subjective. If it's something that, like, objectively, what happened, in my opinion, trends us away from war at least a little bit. But that's a different subject. In terms of, I think, how people see this. First off, you're 100% correct. Usually, the independents, regardless of who is in, will more or less be more discontent than that. That is, at least in terms of my memory, which is not, it's fallible. I admit, but I seem to remember
the wrong direction thing. Like in the wrong direction poll, that number is like usually 70%. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I could be
exactly.
But I thought that was much higher.
That's what I'm saying. Generally, in my memory, it's always been much higher than that, which to me says these polls are a little more simple than they need to be. I think that when we're asking questions like we're going in the right direction, we're trying to average out things that are almost competing interests. Like if we're talking about, let's say, domestic issues, if you ask me if we're going the right direction or wrong direction, I would say I would lean towards wrong direction. And that's to varying extents in certain areas. If we asked about foreign policy, I'd say we're going in the right direction. How do you average that out in a single question? Is the country moving in? And I think that is part of what, again, I was going to, one of the things I was going to say is this is a CNN poll. So it's going to be most likely biased towards the left. It's going to most likely be showing us results that are as kind to the left as possible. And those are the kinds of questions that allow them to present numbers that favor them more. They ask questions like that, which are designed to avoid the nuance. I say this a lot when I talk to you, Jamarl. The average American person is more like a Joe Rogan than like a Donald Trump or a Joe Biden. Joe Rogan is a very eclectic person. He has some views that are very left-wing. He has some views that are very right-wing. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a much more real person. Like, they don't think about things like, oh, it's left-wing, it's right-wing. They think about things like, well, what does this mean to me?
Yeah.
And as much as I do think it's important to recognize that, you know, what the left's agenda is, what the right's agenda is, it's much more important to understand that there is a lot of nuance in the average person that is more or less, they aren't given credit for being able to think about things individually. And this is part of how they control that by asking a question it's too generalized to give a real answer. As far as I'm concerned, that's not a real answer. Because if you talked about it domestically, it wouldn't look like that. If you talked about it foreign policy, it also wouldn't look like that, because I have a feeling the people who have brought that down in the 50s, the wrong direction, who have brought that down in the 50s are probably people who are talking about it thinking from a worldwide perspective. I don't want World War III, and it looks like this is going to divert us away from that. Like, that would be why I would answer, I think we're going in the right direction foreign policy wise. I think we're doing things that are diverting us from World War III. I think when Biden was in office, it looked pretty clear we were headed in that direction. And that scares people like myself who actually pay attention to the world stage, because ultimately, if we end up in World War III, there's the everlasting possibility of nuclear escalation. that would end the world. I don't want that.
Yeah, that's
So
a bad thing. Right.
yeah, that's bad. It's not good at all. So I would easily be able to answer from a foreign perspective that. And I have a feeling that there are a lot of people who are thinking, well, you know what? The domestic stuff, it doesn't work, but I'm not going to see nuclear war if this is the direction of foreign policy we're going to take.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people who probably answered, and that's probably what brought that down from 70. But it's not an accurate view of really what's going on, because if we do have a president who's not bringing us into wars, that's great. But are they gutting everything that makes life in the United States possible?
It's like,
that's
how do I
not
answer
good.
that? I might be like 51-49.
It's really important to separate these things too, because clearly they're not the same thing.
No,
and CNN, I think, in order to be able to present this as fully negative, rather than having it categorically like domestic versus foreign, because you'd see, I think more people are probably favorable towards this foreign policy than not, at least that are informed in any way. Which, by the way, at this point is a lot of people. A lot of people have turned away from these mainstream news stations, more so than just like the Republicans at this point, too. I would argue there's a lot of people who identify as Democrat or even leftists that have turned away from mainstream news, and for good reason. It's biased.
Yeah.
It's propaganda also. It's always biased towards power. That's the
and
thing.
then they pretend that they're not, which is always the aggravating one, right? Like, have you seen the headlines? And I'll end it on this. The headlines around the world where they're like, Donald Trump has gut independent news by killing USAID. It's like, dude, if it's getting USAID, it's not independent news. Like 9 out of 10 media organizations.
Radio Free Asia, the independent radio station.
Right.
The CIA propaganda rag that
it's like
isn't
totally
officially a CIA propaganda rag. They're actually officially independent. We're gutting independent media.
It's so ridiculous. Peter, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate talking to you, Peter. I always enjoy these conversations.
I always do as well, Jamarl. Thanks for having me on.
Coffin. He's a journalist with 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In the book Custom Reality and You, they explore a world where profit is the driving force. You can follow Peter on YouTube and Twitter at Peter Coffin and purchase their book on Amazon. Peter Ouroboros.
Woke Ouroboros.
Woke Ouroboros. A snake that eats his own tail. One of the last books. Are you working on any other books?
I am. I'm working on one called The Road to Fandom. It's I'm going to be asserting that our primary social ideology is fandom. It's essentially a subset of consumerism. Like where everything's, we talk about everything's team sports. It's really because everything's been sort of subsumed by the fandom marketing paradigm. Everybody's a consumer advocate for whatever cause, person, politician, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true. I mean, it's like our identity, it's almost like we want to put it on out, like whatever's internal, we want to have this stuff out. But we have gotten to this kind of weird, like it's the weirdest thing in the world where you see somebody like an Instagram or influencer or like a TikTok influencer or whatever, and they act like they're a celebrity. Like, and I don't mean that like in a sense of like I saw one woman, she was driving a car, she hit somebody while on TikTok. And she looks at the camera and says, well, here's your content for the day. Now, she didn't mean to hit the person, but it is mind-blowing. But like the person is in an accident. All of it's been recorded. And then she looks down after having an argument with the people outside and says, all right, here's your content. And it's like, whoa, that's wild. Like, if you really think about it, that's wild.
It is. It's nuts. It's crazy. Like we have a need for identity and community, and they've essentially, the market has figured out a way to tell us how that's supposed to work.
And market that identity as just your basis of interaction. Exactly. Like when you're on, like, you have a identity that you need to maintain. It's wild.
It's something we can talk about another time. I know I'm extending this. Sorry.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. Peter, thank you, my man. You have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we have come to the end. We've come to the end. Let's go to chats. All chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, bigoted. Also, please hit the like button. I am trying to grow. I am trying to hit the 40K. We are very close to the 40K. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do when I hit the 40K, but we are close. We are approaching. We're like a badger stalking. So close. Let me get to the thing. Mr. Ripley, recall Hunter Biden did something similar to what Zelensky did in the presser. The plea deal for his gun charge was in the bag. Hunter Biden lied about it in court, which pissed off the judge. Yes. Yes. Just so the audience knows what Mr. Ripley is talking about. If you remember, they were trying to ignore the Hunter Biden stuff, the Justice Department. You had whistleblowers who came forward and pointed out the Justice Department is blowing off this case. They don't want to deal with the case. They don't even let us go to Hunter Biden's house. We were being barred from going after researching evidence of this case. Because of that, Weiss was embarrassed. He was put on the spot, and he got super active in pushing the case forward. That case was going on for 5 years where it languished. And finally, they pushed it through. Weiss, effectively, they made a deal with Hunter Biden. Everything was wrapped into the charge, where he was only going to get a slap on the wrist. Hunter Biden goes into court, bitches and moans about it, whines about it. The judge asks a few questions. Are you going to charge him with something later on? Meaning, Hunter Biden was guilty as sin on a fair charge, but fair charges were only used to go after Republicans. His lawyer said, no, this is everything. His lawyer was right. They were trying to get rid of it. The prosecution, because he's being put on the spot now, talking to the judge, he says, well, maybe we might come back later. Now, this is outrageous. You either charge everything or this piecemeal stuff you can't really do. If I take a charge piecemeal, then if you come back later, I might admit to something that you bring into the other charge. Now, also, Hunter Biden's lawyer had already negotiated that all of this stuff was supposed to go away. So when Hunter Biden hears this, they say, well, we're not taking the deal. Now, this is insane. The entire point of the deal was to get rid of all of it. And most likely they would have gotten rid of all of it. They were just being put on the spot. So the lawyer says something else. So the judge was like, okay, well, this case is killed. In which case, the prosecution rebrings the charges and this time uses the laptop in order to go after Hunter Biden, basically trying to put him not necessarily in the cage, but was going after him. He also had the case in California that he was going to have to deal with was a tax charge, was going to be worse than the charge he got hit with in regards to the gun charge. Joe Biden didn't allow the sentencing to come in. He effectively gave him a pardon before any sentencing took place. Hunter Biden most likely knew his dad was going to give him an out. So from his point of view, I'm not accepting anything. I want to skate without my dad getting involved. But if my dad needs to get involved to save my ass, fair enough. I've been living off my dad's name for God knows how long. What's the big deal for this? Dad will be dead in a few years. So he has no negative with him pardoning me, which is exactly what Joe Biden did, which is exactly what everybody assumed Joe Biden would do. Nobody believed that Joe Biden was going to let Hunter Biden go to jail. Hunter Biden could have went to jail, especially for the tax charges in California. Mr. Ripley, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Mudchat. Welcome to the family, Mudchat. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. Alexander G. Tax-free. I doubt, but here you go. It will not be tax-free. Donald Trump was talking about this thing on no tax on tips. He ran on it during his campaign. Now, a lot of people like the idea for obvious reasons. If you're a waiter and you make $2.50 an hour, which is some of the waiters make, but you get a lot of tax money. And so let's say you get $60,000 a year. But you can imagine that if only $2.50 an hour is coming out from the company, then everything above that is tax. I mean, it's tips. So under normal circumstances, you're supposed to declare all of that as income, in which case you have to pay taxes on it. So the majority of jobs in the United States are service jobs. They don't pay well. Service jobs. So you can imagine the impact that would have on either people on Social Security, people who make very little, let's say like in a service job where most of the money is tips, people who are on YouTube who are barely making ends meet. It's big. It's big. The problem with it is that because you have so many people on service jobs, you can imagine that that is going to be trillions of dollars that the government is not getting. So for Donald Trump saying, I want to cut taxes, I want to cut the deficit, we're spending too much money. Okay, fair enough. But doing that effectively impacts the deficit significantly. Significantly. So you're effectively going to blow a hole in the deficit that you, Donald Trump, is saying he wants to close on some level. Now, the notion that you're trying to close it is nonsense. They're giving themselves massive tax cuts themselves. So the part of the reason that they're trying to cut these programs is in order to give themselves tax cuts. So, and to make it worse, increasing taxes on us to give themselves tax cuts. Sir Bike Select, look up Strong Towns Land Value Tax. Thank you, Sir Bike Select. I will. Like I said, I asked Peter the question